our teacher was named Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He was from Tibet, and probably a few of you know of him. And he came to America in the 1970, and first I think went out to California for a bit and traveled there, and eventually settled more in the north, in Karmacholing, which is up in Vermont, our retreat center, and then he established the national headquarters in Boulder, and that's where we, in the early 70s, started a college called Naropa University that's still going. It'll have its 50th anniversary in 2 years. Anyway, Trungpa Rinpoche had studied at Oxford. He got a fellowship there arranged for him by a English woman who became a Tibetan Buddhist nun, and she saw he was very bright and interested in the whole world after he led people out of Tibet when he was 19. So he went to England for 3 or 4 years and started a center up in Scotland called Sammy Ling. And once he got things established in the United States, I think in 1983, he decided that he would introduce the celebration of Vesak, or also known as Vaishaka. And Vaishaka is the name of the 4th month. And in Tibet, they would celebrate both the birth of the Buddha, his enlightenment, and his parinirvana all on the actually, they would do it on 2 days. The 7th day of the 4th month of Vesak, or Vaishaka, was the celebration of the birthday, and then the parinirvana, or the enlightenment and parinirvana, were celebrated on the 15th day. So he combined them all, and we, in 1983, started to tell the different centers around the U.S., Canada, and Europe at that point, to do this particular practice for the 16 staviras. And staviras is the Sanskrit word for, or prakrit, perhaps, for elders. And the 16 elders were these great students or teachers, his chief disciples, who he commanded to protect and preserve his teachings in the future. And so the sadhana that we would do was an invocation to bring the energy and presence of the elders. And I think just to really remind us of the beginning, because it's now something like 2,650 years ago. So we have there's a lot of lead time. There's a long history, a long lineage. And in 1983, he started that, and then in 1985 is when we started to meet as a group, because Rinpoche had also gotten involved lightly with the United Nations, because U Thant, who is a Secretary General and from Burma, he had a couple of dreams. One was to create a University of Peace in Costa Rica, which has happened, and the other was to create an International Peace Center in Lumbini, in in Nepal. And he kept sort of getting us involved with more external affairs and expanding ourselves, not so much as proselytizing, but just we would have more of a presence. Like, we helped the Dalai Lama make his first visit to the United States. And he came to the Dharmadhatu was the first place he came, and we helped his tour happen. And then with the heads of our lineage, the Karmapa and Dudram Rinpoche, the head of the Nyingma lineage, and other teachers came, we would help assist them for their tours around the United States and Canada. So he was getting this energy, getting us more connected with a wider mandala that included not just all of America, but we had some relationship with the World Buddhist Federation. And then in '85, they started the American Buddhist Congress, which was all of the Buddhist groups. So whatever reason, we decided in New York, just because it's so diverse and so many nationalities represented there, that we would try to start to relate to other Buddhist groups. And I was friends with people, or several people in our group were, our Dharma Dhatu is the name of it, the center. We're friends with people, other Kagyu Buddhists, which is our lineage, and Karma Taksam Choling. And then somehow we met Jomyo Tanaka, who is a Shingon priest from Japan. And then we also connected up with Bhante Piatissa from Sri Lanka, and Sandy Rees from Karma Taksam Choling, and Dmitry Bakrushin, who I can't remember the official name of his group, but he was part of the initial gathering.
In New York.
New Buddhist Church.
Buddhist Church, yeah. And I think I heard that he had passed away a few years ago, but anyway, and I know that Bhante Piatissa passed away in, I think, 2016. But we got together very informally. We probably gathered at the Dharma Dhatu. And we had, I think, seen each other at different other Buddhist events, because New York was, it's such an international city, and so many teachers come through here on their way out of the U.S. and also for their first, it's the first place they came. It's not like they were coming to Statue of Liberty or anything, but this is just a very natural introduction to the United States. So we started to get, I think this came from also from our days with Naropa, where we hosted teachers of all different types of traditions, not just Buddhists, but Christian leaders, Jewish leaders, Muslim leaders, Native American, but all different types of spiritual teachers. And with that sort of wide open attitude, whenever Buddhist teachers came to New York, we would try to have them come to the Dharma Dhatu. And through that, we started to meet other Buddhist groups. And that also contributed to this inspiration to gather together. And Rinpoche was very much in favor of us, particularly after the American Buddhist Congress was starting. He liked the idea of us opening our doors and our energy and participation with other Buddhist groups. And from the beginning, I have to say, it was, it felt so harmonious and natural. Just whether people were from Theravadan traditions of Southeast Asia, or the Mahayana Paramita traditions of like Japan, China, Vietnam, and then the Vajrayana traditions of Tibet, and maybe some in India, and also Japan, the Shingon traditions. So we just got along famously. And I have to say that I know what it's like to try to run a Dharma center, but anywhere now. It's you have to be on it all the time to have programs for new people, education and talks, but also how are you gonna meet the nut each month and raise money to keep the center alive? It's not a simple task. So it demands putting your body, speech, and mind into the whole thing, and usually not just 5, but more like 6 and 7 days a week. So New York City, when I came there, when I came to the center, I'd been in Boulder for 7 or 8 years, and I'd also gone to, I was sent over to Europe to start the centers there, along with a fellow named Sherab Chudzin. So that also sort of fed into my interest in having people from different groups, different nations. And when we began our sessions, we decided this is how we would begin each time. We'd go around the room, and everyone would do their opening chants for whatever they would do if they were doing a gathering or a meeting, even in their offices at their center. And so each group would do that, and at the end we would all go around the room and dedicate the merit as we would do it. And that was very endearing. So as we started to meet more and share more about the liturgies or the practices that we did, at one point it just became obvious that we as a group should present a common celebration or a common profile to the public. And because whether we were Theravadan or Mahayana or Vajrayana, we are all children of the Buddha, so to speak, students of the Buddha. And we all have taken a refuge vow, and we are all part of a common sangha there. Having taken refuge in the Buddha, obviously, is an example of not a god, not someone divine, but a human who demonstrated that it was possible to wake up, to liberate our innate nature and come to follow a path of liberation. And then in the same way, the teachings, the Dharma, whether it was what we read or heard from teachers, or also maybe even more importantly, how it met up and corresponded with our own personal experience. So there's so many things that we share, a sense of obviously discipline, the discipline of meditation, sitting practice. I don't know what kind of pujas or recitations or chanting. And then in terms of daily life, how we would develop our own mindfulness and awareness so we could maintain some continuity of the wakefulness that we experienced in meditation. So, and then I guess in some way, most importantly, I thought, was Sangha. We discovered that we were a common Sangha with the Buddhist Council. And it wasn't, it never felt like there was even any ripples of sectarian expression. It was just like if we'd all been children of a wonderful grandparents. And so obviously the house got too big, so had to move out, and everybody had to go their own way and have their own tradition. And all the traditions had such richness, which we discovered more of as we started to do Vesak. So the first Vesak ceremony, are you all familiar with the City Core building? You know, it's got the slant, and on the top and inside it has a 2-story high, has an amazing pipe organ for one thing, and a 2-story high sanctuary of St. Peter's Church. And I've got to say that first gathering was in some way sort of incomparable. We did so many, we had so much going on. We had representatives from every tradition. And I don't know if you've ever looked at the program, but we started with an outdoor procession. We began at Lexington Avenue and 53rd Street, and we walked very slowly, almost like we were doing walking meditation, which was, even that had to be an anomaly for watchers, people walking by, because moving so slow in contrast to the giddy-up speed of New Yorkers, you know, who know where they're heading towards next. But it was at 7 o'clock at night, and it was in May, so it was light enough for people to see us. And you know, later we would do Vesak at other locations, like up by St. John the Divine, or at the Universalist Society on the Upper West Side. And often we would walk in Central Park, and it was the same way that we had bodyguards that came because the ambassador from Sri Lanka to the United Nations always was there, His Excellency Ambassador Jayawardena. And he came along, so we had a couple of husky guys, and they were on the outside of us in case bicyclists, you know, this is when, I think there were times when the Central Park, you know, the internal route was closed, and so they had to stand there and divert the bicyclists to go around us. But we always seemed to gather some attention, and people would ask us who we were and where we were going. Anyway, we would proceed with a 30-minute walk, and we got there to the St. Peter's Church. And I just want to go over what the ceremony, or just what the events were. At the first one, I gave the introductory remarks, and then Venerable Bhante Pietissa from the Buddhist Vihara did the homage to the Buddha and recited the refuge vows and the precepts, and we would read along with him. And then there were further liturgies, again for the Theravadins by Venerable Pietissa, and then from the Mahayana, Bernie Glassman, Tetsugen Glassman Sensei of the Zen community of New York, recited a particular liturgy and aspirations, and then Reverend Fa Yun from the Grace and Gratitude Buddhist Temple. And then for Vajrayana, there was Jamyal Tanaka from Mandala Buddhist Center, and then different Tibetan Buddhist monks, and then one of our other fellow student of Trungpa Rinpoche is named Pema Chodden, and y'all may have heard of her because she's widely published and well-known author, wonderful person. And then also Carl Springer, who is the head of the U.S. Lumbini Committee, because at that point the United Nations had asked our national organization to try to organize more groups and try to garner support and develop the future peace center. Because U Thant's idea about Lumbini, which was the birthplace of the Buddha, is that that would become a site for negotiations when countries would have disputes, that they could go there and hopefully in the atmosphere of that of the Buddha's birthplace, they would be able to work things out. So we were starting to do that, work on the Lumbini committee. And then the keynote address was given by His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche, who's one of the higher ranking Buddhist gurus from Tibet. And the head of our lineage was known as His Holiness Karmapa, and his four chief disciples, called the four princes, were Situ Rinpoche, Shama Rinpoche, Jamgon Rinpoche, and Gyaltsab Rinpoche. And Situ Rinpoche just happened to be in America, so he came and gave the keynote address. And then we had a further presentation about Lumbini, and then concluding remarks and a candle lighting ceremony. So then we finished with the dedication of merit, led by Venerable Pietissa again. So afterwards, one of the highlights then, and for many gatherings after that, was the different centers, particularly from Southeast Asia, who seemed to be wonderful cooks, and they were used to always coming up with big spreads of food. They would host and have food in reception. And then at the same time, a little bit after that, there was entertainment. The Korean Buddhist temple offered a dance in the chapel. There was a shakuhachi music played. There was a film about Vesak in Sri Lanka. There was children's choruses. There was the plays that I know, not this time, but other times, Life of the Buddha and Tangerine of Mindfulness, a play I think was written and produced and directed by Rochelle. So there was a lot going on. It wasn't like a three-ring circus, but it felt full and it felt very celebratory. And the idea is that we weren't lamenting anything, but we're celebrating the introduction of the teachings into the world by the Buddha. And over the years, I'd say it started to grow more, and it did lead to other participation in other types of events, not just Lumbini, but we ended up having receptions at the United Nations because of the Lumbini connection. And we would have lots of ambassadors. One time Henry Kissinger was there. We talked to him about whether or not he was a meditator. He said, he didn't have time. And we reminded him that, U Thant would meditate for an hour a day, even during the Bay of Pigs crisis. So he laughed. And then also, I noticed you on the minutes of the last meeting, you mentioned something about relating to the mayors. And In 1987, I was asked to do a talk at Gracie Mansion, and so I went there, and we met in this room around a big table, and there's coffee and cookies, and I spoke with Mayor Koch briefly, and they said, "Okay, we're ready for the talks." And what I didn't realize is that it was actually a presentation to about 500 people on the lawn of at Gracie Mansion, and it wasn't just me, but it was people from the Urban League, from other religious traditions, from other nonprofit activist groups. So even early on, we've had some sort of profile or some presentations were invited, and in what I've learned from talking to Rochelle is that y'all met with Mayor Adams, and I researched a little bit about him and saw that he had introduced meditation, or tried to introduce meditation to the police department in New York, and I get the impression he is maybe a regular meditator. So it seems like a great opportunity, and I've got to say that New York's always, anytime we try to extend ourselves and meet more people, it always felt like there was an opening. It's almost like the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are maybe watching, and I think there was some positive energy for us, if for you, if you choose to go forward and to reach out a little bit. And it's always interesting to see what kind of communication and what kind of connections can develop. You never know, and I think there's a lot of fortuitous opportunities out there. So I would encourage it. I think New York is receptive and it's open to the Dharma. And even though I feel like Buddhists carry themselves in such a way that they are recognized or known for gentleness and kindness and openness and genuineness as well. You remember that in some ways we're revolutionaries because the way we present non-aggression. It seems to go against the grain in some ways, but I think that's in people's hearts. So that's why we draw attention and respect. And it's anyway. I guess all of this is just, I wish to give as much encouragement to you as possible.
Wow,
So
thank you. Oh.
no, thank you. I don't know if you have questions.
Yeah, please. Wow, that was really great. Anyone have some comments, questions?
Well, one thing that Randy didn't mention, which I think is worth mentioning, the reason he came to New York is because Chogyam Trungpa, our teacher, appointed him the ambassador to New York, the New York Center. Before it was called Shamala, it was called Dharmadhatu. So that's why he came to New York. And he was a great ambassador. A great teacher. So thank you, Randy.
Also, my wife lived there. I just met her at a seminar in Colorado, and it was a great opportunity to leave Boulder and go to the big city. I never imagined. I grew up in Texas. I never ever imagined I would end up in New York City, and it was one of the richest surprises of my life. James?
Yes, thank you so much, Randy, for coming and speaking to us. I was going to ask about Changyang Rinpoche, and it's going to seem a little odd. I was going to say, how do you feel? I believe that Changyang Rinpoche's legacy has to be built up again in New York.
Uh-huh.
And we've got great two lineage people here with you, and we have Robert and Rochelle here. And I was just saying, how do you feel that the Buddhist Council can support that process? I don't know if you even have sort of this second point.
I don't know. Just, I think if everybody keeps doing their own practice and remembers the heart of the teachings of compassion for others and combining it with skillful means and wisdom, I think it'll have a natural, sort of a natural evolution. I really have no idea. Because of being involved with the Buddhist Council of New York and then briefly with American Buddhist Congress. I think it's disappeared now. And the fact that the Buddhist Council of New York, it's sort of the longest running congregation of diverse traditions of Buddhism in America, I think. I'm always wondering what is the future of what is American Buddhism about? And it just seems like it's changing all the time. And we find our footing, we lose it. We find some ground, and then things come along to introduce more groundlessness and shake things up. So I think it's something you just stay with. At least that's how I feel. I keep practicing what I've been taught and what I understand, and sharing that, and keep moving forward. And I'm not trying to be evasive about anything. I'm just, every other day it seems like I talk to somebody about what is happening in terms of Dharma. And I was out there on the East Coast a couple of months ago. My daughter just moved to Massachusetts, and I stopped along the way in White Plains and saw some friends who have a center at Westchester, and I was at Omega Institute and talked to people, and then I was in Woodstock where there's a monastery, and and then I have friends in Northampton who have an Engagement Mindfulness Institute, and I keep and also Prison Dharma Network, and I just would ask and say, what do you see as happening? And it's, for our Sangha, there's sort of a diaspora that's happened, but there's also groups of people that are slowly coming together and starting to have practice situations and sustained groups. And, in the same way that we say that impermanence is indestructible, I think the Dharma and the teachings of the Buddha are indestructible, and they'll somehow find a way to sustain, because it's just based on kindness and truth.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
This is not the question, but I just realized you wear the scarf.
Oh,
Yeah, that's from the 30th anniversary of the Buddhist Council.
I know, and Rochelle reminded me of it, and
Yeah,
I thought it wouldn't make me look like Santa's helper too much. Plus, I love the color. I love this red color. It's just, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
I like to wear scarves. I don't get to wear scarves out here. It doesn't usually get cold enough.
And then at that time we did have the what do you call it, the events, the Vesak events at the St. Paul Church. So the people, so that was a 30. So it would be nice to go back to the where you started, so
Yes.
that everybody was at that
Yeah.
the spot. So I just wanted to mention how important that is. And
Do you all get to travel much around the country? I mean, do you have other brother and sister Sangha groups that you visit? I'd be very curious about what you see about Dharma in America. To me, it's a very lively and vital topic. And I'm always curious about the different traditions and how things are developing, just because like I said earlier, it takes a lot to sustain a center and keep it going. And I think it's important I just think it's great to stay in touch with one another. I think we have a lot to share with each other, and I always learned from coming to the group. I've got to say, because I felt sometimes there's a lot of intensity in just keeping things going. I felt like when I got together with the Buddhist Council, it's like I could relax and say, and just ask questions of Bhante, Pietissa, or Tanaka Sensei, and just, what's going on? How's it going for you? What do you see? So you have a lot to offer. I think it's so cool that Union Theological Seminary has I guess teaching and classes and curriculum involving Dharma. My father was a Presbyterian minister in Texas, and till he was 60, he was in Houston, Texas at a very big church, and then he moved to the hill country of Texas and became like a circuit rider, and would just go each week. He would go to smaller churches, and he loved that.
Yeah, this morning I was at the health my local health food store.
Mm.
And behind the counter, all the people that work there were from every country in imaginable. And they were talking a different language amongst each other. And someone said, "Speak English, you're in New York." And I said, "New York is not America." America, they speak English, you're an American. I said, "New York is not America." The man that was helping me was Nepali. They were people that were just every single imaginable
Mhm.
nationality. They all work there. So that's why I think the Buddhist Council is so prevalent here, because there are so many different diverse groups. Like in Queens, I think in the entire world, they have the most diverse groups of people living in Queens that represent every country in the world.
Yeah. It is a natural site for United Nations, right?
It is. So it's very heartwarming. And the thing that's so amazing is that people really accept each other.
Mhm.
I think that's the beauty of New York.
I've got to say, I've met so many different people because of the Buddha Dharma, in all walks of life. It's sort of amazing. I would never expect to come across people who are very curious and interested in Buddha Dharma. I meet with a group once a month of scientists at the university called Buddhism and Science, and it's people involved in neuroscience, psychiatry, religious studies, physics, quantum mechanics. It's like, and they have a real curiosity because what the Buddhists discovered, that there is no such thing as a partless particle. There's no atom that's indivisible. It doesn't exist, and nor is there this notion of an external objective reality. These are all things the Buddha saw way back then, and it's very profound and incomprehensible to me still in many ways to understand that level of physics. But it's just remarkable how many people you meet that if you just mention Dharma without trying to proselytize, things come up and you find so much in common.
Hi, Randy. Yeah, thank you very much for your. I don't have a question, but just want to say thank you very much for your, firsthand experience of developing a very popular, well-known, very beneficial for the living beings, the Shambhala Center. And I met a lot of Shambhala Center practitioner, but you're the very dedicated person, and I can hear that how much time you spend and how hard work you put on this center until now. So I'm really thank you for your sharing the firsthand experience about the Shambhala Center and Rinpoche, especially Rinpoche. So that's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yeah.